the great songs of all time. I was just thinking, imagine when we all get to heaven. That's another good song. We all get to heaven. What a day, glorious day that'll be. Imagine we get to heaven and everybody, millions, millions, and millions of Christians through all the ages, and standing before God's throne and singing, "How Great Thou Art." Can you imagine what that's going to sound like? I mean, you've probably heard some big choirs and good choirs, but imagine what that's going to sound like when every Christian can stand in front of his throne and sing, "How great thou art. How great thou art." So last week we talked about, can God keep me saved? Psalm 78, 12 through 20, if curious, if you can look that up, we'll read that in a minute. We don't always understand everything. We don't always understand everything that happens. We don't understand everything that is going on. We don't understand everything as it's our minds can't get a hold of it. Mark used to tape Beverly Hillbillies, and he'd tape several shows when he worked in the evenings. He worked second shift, and then when he got home, Doris always stayed up till Mark got home. Then they stayed up watching shows for a while, and we had a lot of conversations about the Beverly Hillbillies. How many of you know? How many of you watched the Beverly Hillbillies? You know who it is? Anybody here has not watched the Beverly Hillbillies? In that, me and Mark would always talk, and in the Beverly Hillbillies was always humor. Of course, they came from Tennessee and struck oil, and they said, you got to move to California. That's the place you ought to be. So they loaded up the truck and they moved to Beverly. They just sold that house, that mansion that they rented a few years ago. They rented that for like $3,000 a week, or whatever it was. It was very cheap, whatever it was when they made those episodes. They just sold it for several $1 million, 67, whatever, how many it was. Well, they had in that humor, and me and Mark would talk. It was adult humor, not filthy humor, but it's things that the kids might laugh at, but the adults got it. I thought of two things. They invited, one time, remember the Drysdales, they lived next door, and they invited them over for dinner. They hadn't been there very long. And they were in the billiard room. The sign over the door said billiards, so Jethro, they always took everything to the extreme. Jethro said that was the billiard room. And up on the wall was a huge mounted bison head. And Jethro said they must call this the billiard room because that's a billiard. Well, they used the pool table. You know how they use their humor. They thought that was the dinner table, and Granny made fried chicken. How many know what a bridge is on a pool table? Got some holes in it. You can, if your ball's in a precarious place, your cue ball, you can use that bridge and go over another ball and hit it. Well, Jethro said they got this fancy pot holder. They'd use a bridge and pass around that pot of fried chicken. And then Jethro said, this is a pretty neat table. Said, oh no, there's 6 holes here, and that's to put the chicken bones, and they put their chicken bones inside this. And the other one I thought about was, Granny's cooking one day, and Jed came in. She said, I'm hungry. He said, I'm hungry. She said, well, so Jethro said that this town's got some weird birds. He said they're called golfs. And he said, Jethro picked up a bunch of these golf eggs out there. And she said, I boiled them, but they're still hard. She said, Jethro's already eaten a half a dozen. He said they're hard to chew, but they're okay. So Uncle Jed tries to cut it in half, but, you know, a bird called golfs. Well, if you didn't understand the humor, you wouldn't understand. That's how life is. We don't always get the whole gist of everything. How many of you ever had somebody tell you a joke, and you don't get the punchline, and you'll say, huh? Now, I just mentioned Becky's sister. I don't know where she came up with that thing. Every time you trip, she'd say, you walk to work or carry your lunch. Linda was very smart in high school. She got straight A's all through high school. Got to college, got the BBC, and the English professor had her tutoring other kids. But when you told the joke, Linda would always, about 10 seconds, 15 seconds later, she'd say, oh, now I get it, and she'd start laughing. We don't always catch everything. So the question is, can God, let's talk about the people. So Carrie, if you read verses, Psalm 78, verses 12 through 20.
Marvelous things did he in the sight of our fathers in the land of Egypt, in the field of Zoan. He divided the sea and caused them to pass through, and he made the waters to stand as a heap. In the daytime also he led them with a cloud, and all the night with a light of fire. He clave the rocks in the wilderness, and gave them drink as out of the great depths. He brought streams also out of the rock, and caused waters to run down like rivers. And they sinned yet more against him by provoking the Most High in the wilderness. And they tempted God in their heart by asking meat for their lust. Yea, they spake against God. They said, Can God furnish a table in the wilderness? Behold, he smote the rock, that the waters gushed out, and the streams overflowed. Can he give bread also? Can he provide flesh for his people?
So, questions. We all have questions. If you want somebody who has questions, be around my wife. She'll ask 30 questions. If you want somebody who has questions, I have a cousin who lives in Florida, Norma Jean, named her after my mom. And Norma Jean is one of those, she's been on a couple of grand juries, but she's one of those that will think of every little thing, and some of the lawyers don't like her because she asks too many questions. I mean, she comes up with things that I wouldn't think of, maybe you wouldn't think of, but Norma Jean does. She works on the military base down there, and she has a unique job. She is the one who, there's a vault, and all this stuff in there, guard there, and only her and a couple other people are allowed in there. She's the one that takes, and she will, when they have a special group going out, whether it's SEALs or something like that, she goes in, and she's the one that assigns those people. Nobody knows but her and a couple other people above her. They're the only ones who know who that group is. But Norma Jean is one of those who thinks about every little detail. So can God? They spake against God. They said, can he furnish a table in the wilderness? You know, you would think that after all the things they saw God do, that they would trust him. So I want to see from the scripture that God can. Not that can God, but God can. But let's reverse those two words again. If all of us were to be honest, we have all said at some point, can God? We've not trusted. We're going to talk about that in Sunday school, but and we didn't tell you Dave and Don were going to be gone because then you guys would plan on being, you get me for a Sunday school teacher. We didn't want to have an excuse to leave. But can God? God can. But we ask questions sometimes. Well, can God really, is he really able to do this? I have had God slap me upside the head when I said, God's not going to, I'm the preacher. But I said, no, God's not going to do that. Get slapped up beside the head, and the Lord says, watch me. And he does. And usually when he answers our prayers when we question him, what does he do? Not only does he answer that prayer and fix it, he does it overabundantly. Remember a couple weeks ago we talked about that song, drinking from the saucer, Lord. He fills up our cup with blessings, and the blessings are so full they run over. And then the saucer may get full and it may run over too. But can God? God can. So first of all, the condition of the people. The condition of the people. This is a two-part sermon, so the second half is going to be next week. But they were faithless. Verses 20 and 41. Now, faith. How important is faith? So here's a people who called themselves godly people. They called on God's name. They trusted God. They said they trusted God. Here's a people who they should have trusted him with all that he had done. I mean, look at what God did for them. Yes, how many years did they spend in the wilderness? 40 years. That's a long time. 40 years going around in circles. Of course, the joke is, that's because the men wouldn't ask for directions. Whatever it was, they walked around in circles for 40 years. But during that time, did God keep them alive? Yes, he provided quail. Yes, he provided manna. Yes, he provided food. And yes, they surely had to be creative with the way they had to fix it. I mean, fix manna in the microwave. You cook it over the grill. You cook it on the fire. Of course, you know, I'm just joking. They didn't have microwaves back then. They just had grills. You get one thing, but you had to have sustenance. How many of you like going very long? How many of you, raise your hand if you usually don't go a whole day without eating? How many of you eat every day? Yeah. Jim has said many times, I'm not going to eat till the next time I eat. You get stuffed at a meal, and I'm not eating till the next time I eat. You sit down at Thanksgiving dinner and you just stuff yourself. And then those chemicals start kicking in, and then you start getting tired and getting sleepy, and you watch the football games or whatever, and then a little while later you see this Kentucky Fried Chicken commercial. And you're not hungry because you just said you're stuffed. And you see this Kentucky Fried Chicken commercial. If we had smell-o-vision, we'd all be in trouble. And you get up and you do what? You go to the Frigidator, or as Ryan said when he was little, Frigidator. You go in there and you get something to eat. You're not really hungry, you just the power of suggestion. But God took care of them, He provided food. Yet they seemed oblivious to the power of God in the midst. And I think that's our problem today, is that we get to a place, well, let me rephrase that. We have to make sure Satan doesn't get us to a place where we say, okay, Lord, I don't think you're going to do it. I just can't see the end of the road. I can't see the light of the tunnel. We were talking about Danny Searchel the other day. Sonny, is your husband crazy? Yes. Could say Mary Sonny, but we don't say it. Danny would go in a train tunnel. And he said he'd go back in the train tunnel quite a ways and wait for a train to come. And he said the rush was to get out of the train tunnel before the train comes. You wonder why it's the way he is. He gets it from his grandpa. Am I right, Gary? Danny does stuff, climbs up on top of a trestle. He climbs up on things to get pictures. The Lord's protected him. He's protected him many times, but it's fun to run out of the tunnel to see if you can get out in time. If you've seen train tunnels, if you've seen trains come out of them, there's not much room. Even if you had room, there's a vacuum when that train goes by. But Danny said, oh, that's a lot of fun to do something like this. I hope as he's getting older, he doesn't do that as much. But instead of trusting God and living in faith, we worry and we fret. But it doesn't have to be that way. We have a God in whom we can trust. And I have down here, without reservation and without fear. Satan uses fear to stop us. Because when you're afraid of something, you will stop in your tracks. When you're afraid of something, you will stop in your tracks. Spiders. My wife says the only good spider is a dead spider. A few weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, I remember I was in the kitchen or whatever, and she was in there taking a shower. She got out of the shower, and I heard a blood-curdling scream. I mean, it wasn't just a little scream. I think they heard it up at the fire station or Kroger even. I mean, she let out a scream, and she had her house shoes in the bathroom. By the time I got in there, she had that house shoe, and she was beating. I don't know if it was a wolf spider, I don't remember, but she was beating that thing to death. After the 4 or 5 times she hit, and every time she swung her house shoe and hit it and she screamed, that thing was gone. It wasn't going to survive at all. To Jim, a good snake is a dead snake. To Ann, a good mouse is a dead mouse. You know, we all have fears. There are people who are afraid of going up steps. There are people who are afraid of going down steps. There are people who are afraid of escalators. There are people who are afraid of elevators. There are people we all have some kind of fear. I love roller coasters. I've ridden 70 different ones, but I don't like Ferris wheels. Never have. Now those big ones that are closed in that go up 300 feet, they don't bother me at all. But I never have liked since I was a kid. I got on one. I don't know why. I'll do any daredevil thing. I bungee jump. I'd like to do that. I'd like to do all kinds of stuff. But Ferris wheels, open seat, I just don't like them. And I have avoided them for years. Matter of fact, the last time I've been on a little Ferris wheel, first year we moved here, went to the fair. Me and Ryan got on one, and Randy wanted on it. He cried. He went on there with us. He was only 18, 19 months old. He went on there with us, so Becky stopped the guy. The guy stopped it, let him on. We got to the top. Before I knew it, Randy wanted off, and he stood up. And I grabbed him, and Becky said, went up, grabbed that guy, stop that thing when he gets down there, my baby's going to fall. And he stopped it again and got Randy off. That's the last time I was on a little Ferris wheel. You said, that's stupid. You do all this other stuff upside down. I have no idea. I just don't like the Ferris wheel. So, fear. We have a God in whom we can trust, not fear. Listen to John chapter 20, verse 27. Then saith to Thomas, he told Thomas, you know the story, he said, reach hither your finger, and behold my hands. And he said, reach hither thy hand, and thrust it into my side, and be not faithless, but believing. Well, you're not really the Son of God. We saw you die. Well, he said, Thomas, what's our nickname for Thomas? The doubter. Thomas, doubting Thomas. You look at these scars in my hands. I didn't get them from doing little jobs. Look at my side where they're pierced it with a sword. Go ahead, it's there. Look, believe. That's what he wants us to do, and that's what he's telling these people. Can God? They're questioning what God can do. So secondly, they were forgetful. Verse 7 and verse 42. It seems that the nation of Israel, they couldn't, for some reason, they couldn't remember all of the, and we have to call them wonderful miracles that God had performed. Now, all through the Old Testament, God performed miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle to show these people who he was. Who else could make a donkey talk? Who else could cause that cloud to follow the fire, a cloud of fire, the pillar of fire and the clouds? Who else could cause the Red Sea to part? And not only part, you've been around where there's water and mud. Normally, if you opened up a bunch of water, if you got it away from there, it'd be all muddy. They walked around, the Bible says they walked on what kind of ground? They walked on dry ground. Not only did God part that water, they walked across there, 1 million, 2 million people on dry ground. They're finding now, a few years ago they started excavating, they're finding in that area, amazing how they're finding chariots and chariot wheels and chariot parts where God parted the water, because the Bible said then, here comes the Egyptian army. Finally Pharaoh said, I've had enough, I decided I want them back, go get them. They're finding chariot parts where in the Red Sea. They didn't just fall from the sky. That ground had to be dry for the chariots to get on it. God has been performing miracles for these people all their lives. But we could point our finger and say, shame on you, Israelites. Why don't you believe? What did I say in the beginning? Many of us do the same thing. We say, Lord, I just don't really think you can do it. We may not say it out loud. We may whisper it to ourselves, but guess what? God knows every thought and intent of our heart. He wants us to have faith. That's the thing. Both lessons today, the sermon and the Sunday school lessons on faith. The nation of Israel, they suffered from a serious bout of forgetfulness. Now, I'm not talking about the forgetfulness like we do. They were forgetful of how he had delivered them from Egypt. We just talked about that. The plagues. How he had parted the Red Sea. How he made the waters of Marah pure. We can't even begin to list all those miracles. He had made their enemies, he put them on the run. How he provided himself to be the God that they needed. But they were forgetful of the mighty power of God. Look at that next slide. They were forgetful of God's mighty power. Now, we have the Word of God now. We have a lot more details than they had. So, we know more about what God is and who He is than maybe they did, because they didn't have the written Word like we have. We know now of what God did in Genesis. From nothing. There was absolutely nothing here. Not even a proton. Not even a neutron. It was nothing. The Bible says God created all from nothing. And in 6 days, God spoke everything we know and see into existence. everything we see into existence. The wood that you're sitting on, these pews, it came from trees. The oak trees, how do you know it's oak? Because of the grain. You can tell what it is. It came from trees. God made the trees. The food that we eat. God made the seeds. God made the food. The chickens, the steaks, whatever you eat, whether it's herbs or whether it's meat or whatever it is, God made it all. None of it was here. The light, the sun, God made it all. I saw a thing a while back. It said, why did they put expiration dates on bottles of water? It's the same water God created when He created the world. Think about it. It's not going to expire. How can it go bad? Still use it. But God made it all. But they were forgetful of His mighty power. They didn't have all the details written down like we do of how He did all these things. They didn't have all the miracles written down, but they were told of, and they experienced it. You would think that experience would cause you not to forget. But we are human beings. We let feelings get in our way. We let things get in our way that shouldn't. We let things get in our way that stop us. So again, this describes us today, doesn't it? So how many times has God come through for us? And how many times has He moved mountains? He's parted the waters in our lives. And then sometimes we doubt Him. Yes, humans. Sometimes we have a good reason for doubting humans, but God? And then something happens, we say, Lord, are you really there? Have you left me? Are you gone? I need you. Lord, I don't need you tomorrow. I need you right now. He's always there. He said, I will never leave you nor forsake you, but we use those things, and Satan gets in our mind and gives us thoughts. How many times has He lifted the veil of affliction from us and suffering? We ask Him to help us. How many times has He spoken peace to our storm? And I'm talking about not these tornadoes. Well, spiritually. Do we get spiritual tornadoes? Everything starts spinning. And we start wondering, and these storms of life come along. But He said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. What a promise. We've talked about this many times over the years, we've all had friends who, at one time, they were the best friends we had. They were best friends and did things together. We've all had them, and for some reason, they parted. Or some reason, we parted. We left their friendship, or they left our friendship. We all probably have people who were like that. At one time, as Mike says, some people are thicker than thieves. The thieves stick together. They're a band. They stay together. But sometimes we're not thicker than thieves with God. Okay, Lord, I know you can do it in the back of my mind, but I don't have time to mess with this. But He gives us peace in the storm. Look at this next slide. How many times has He met our needs? He's done the impossible, and He's proven Himself to be our God. None of us could probably count the times of the miracles that God performed in our lives. We probably couldn't remember all of them. Several years ago, I added up and remembered all the roller coasters. I know I've ridden 70 different roller coasters. Now, sitting there the other day watching a video on the computer, watching roller coasters. They got videos one time of ones I have ridden. And trying to add up, I can't remember all of them now, but at one time I added them all up. But we do forget things. But we must not forget who God is. We do not want to ever go one day without Him. Matter of fact, let's change that phrase. We can't exist without Him. Is that true? We don't want to exist without Him. Once you become a born-again Christian, boy, your life changed. Mine did. Yours should have changed. Should have changed tremendously. So often have we forgotten about what God does. We need to take a look. We got to take a look and remember God. If God did it then, we can be sure, and I mean 100% sure, but I should have made this a slide. We can be sure that He'll do it now. Because He said, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. We're just as important. If you're a born-again Christian, you're as important as anyone else on this world. Including the Jews. They have to be saved. God's going to use them, yes. Pray for them. Pray for our country. All these protests, it's getting out of hand. My opinion is, all these college kids protest, start big stuff like that, kick them out of school. No, I'm not in charge, so they won't do they don't care what I say. That's my opinion. You may not have the same opinion. You're entitled to be wrong. I mean, you're entitled to, we're all entitled to our opinion, but they're going to do something like that. Get out of here, we don't want you. But you know, it's okay because it's Israel. They let them do that. But imagine if it was the Muslims that were protesting. Boy, there'd be a riot. Boy, there'd be stopping to it. Let's not get on that. I'll get on one of Troy's soapboxes. We need to take inventory and remember the Lord's power when the next storm comes. So look at this last slide. They were foolish. Now, they're asking, can God? They proved their ignorance of His power and His person. You know, it's not all about us. God doesn't just perform the miracles for us. He does it also to prove Himself. Now, we all are able to do certain things, and the younger we are, the more we can do certain things. Mike's been this tree, it's actually on Rachel's property, but the Doris' old house, but it was probably that big around that thing that fell down. And him and Eli have been working on that thing. And Mike's been doing it some to get out and get exercise, because he's in the house all the time with Linda and not doing a lot. So he's been the last few weeks, he's been out there splitting that tree, cutting that thing, putting it in pieces, splitting it on a splitter, and he got some big pieces. And him and Eli spent a good part of the day yesterday working on that thing. And they've done a bunch of, there's a big pile of wood there, and you know, Rachel didn't, Heath and Pam and Rachel own the house, and Rachel didn't want to, and Bill, they didn't really want to mess with it, but Mike said, hey, it's not on my property, but it's Mom's property, I'll just give you something to do. Exercise. Because we've been talking a lot about it the last couple of weeks. We can't do what we used to do. Jim, could you build a house the size that you have? Could you do that now? Could you build a smaller one? Joyce, would you build it with your strength now? Could you do that, what you guys did with the cabin? First time they invited us to the cabin, she said, come down and see our little cabin. In popcorn. We thought it was the size of popcorn. 3 stories. They're more square feet than our house. They're a little cabin, but they did it. And Joyce bought most of her stuff. Where'd you buy it, Joyce? The classifieds. You like, they got the wood and everything, all kinds of stuff. But we can't do what we used to do. Connie used to be on your feet most of the day cutting hair. Could you do that now? Would it be as easy? How come? I heard Fran talk this morning. She got up late and she had to rush a little bit because she got up a little late. That all happened, all of us. Me and Robert are laughing back there. Wish we could sleep. I was awake at 5:30 this morning. Robert said, I beat you. I was awake at 5. He's got to get back. You know, you got to be on top. You know, we just can't. We're so used to getting up at 3 o'clock. We just can't sleep. We went to bed last night. My wife got up. She was up till 2:30. Couldn't go to sleep. We're tired as could be. Maybe someday, you know what? We'll go on vacation sometime and we'll want to sleep all the time. Go figure. Anyway, can God? We have to put our faith and trust in God like these people did not. So the same scene was played out many times in the Old Testament. One time that comes to mind, we know what happened when the 12 spies were sent to Canaan. They go in there and God, he sends 12 spies in, you know the story. Well, they encountered a bunch of people known as the Anakim, and they say they were giants. They say some of them were 8 to 10 feet tall. Now to us, that's tall. To me, 7 foot is tall. I'm 6'2", but when I see someone 7 foot, Andrew, how tall are you?
About 6'5".
6'5"? I had a roommate that was 6'5", and I had a roommate that was 6'7". I was 6'2", and Trevor, our other roommate, he was 6 foot. That we had 4 guys in our room in college who were real short guys. But to them, the 6'5" and 6'7", they looked tall to me. But imagine 7, 8, 9 feet. The spies go in there, and boy, we can't take care of it. We can't do anything. It'll never work. There's a bunch of giants in there. Did you see the one slide that was up here earlier? The big David and Goliath. And in front of Goliath it said the Muslim nations. And David represents Israel. Did you see what it said on the bottom? You remember what it said? My money's on Israel. They're God's people. Guess who's going to win the war? Not the Muslim countries. Israel's going to win the war. While there, they encountered a whole bunch of people. They were giants. And when the 10 faithless spies came back, when they saw the giants, they looked at them, and they looked at themselves, and they compared themselves as grasshoppers according to Numbers chapter 13, verse 33. In reality, they were comparing them to their problems. And they went back and said, Joshua, we're in trouble, dude. We can't do it. Becky sings a song with the kids. 12 men went to spy on Canaan, 10 were bad and 2 were good. What do you think they saw in Canaan? 10 were bad and 2 were good. It took the faith of 2 spies, not the majority. It took the faith of 2. They came back and said, we can do it, God can do it. Let's take that 2, divide it in half. What's half of 2? Uno. 1. With me or you and God, we're a majority. I know you're using your math. One preacher said I had to take algebra in school, and he said I've never used pi r squared in any sermon. I can vouch for that. I've never, I just did, but only as an example. But once again, we're guilty of the same type of comparisons. If we let the devil get in our ear, he starts whispering in this ear. And those little whispers, they go in and they get into that little brain of ours. And we start believing him. And we start saying, wow, maybe he is right. I know I've told you before, but as we close, I worked with a guy. It's not Joyce by the other day. When he was a kid, his dad told him he was worthless. His dad told him, you don't amount to anything. Leroy was short, but he said, his dad told him all the time, you're just a worthless child. What a bad thing to tell to a child. He got saved. And a couple years later, he started thinking, you know what? I don't care what my dad, by this time his dad had died. Or no, he was alive till he was an adult. But he said, you know what? I'm a child of God. I am worth just as much as anybody else. I'm a child of God. I am worth something. And it took God to change his mind because his dad convinced him that you're worthless. That you're worthless. His sister used to tattle him all the time and tell his parents that he did stuff to her when he didn't. So one day they were home, he beat the tar out of her, and he got in trouble for that. But we are worth everything. Faith. This is only half the message. So Father, we're asking your blessings. Maybe there's someone sitting right here. We're not going to have an invitation today. We're not going to sing. There may be somebody sitting right in this auditorium who's not a Christian. As far as I know, everyone here is born again. But if there be anyone here, when we dismiss, may they come up and say, hey, can you pray with me? Maybe you're watching by video and you say, I'm not a Christian. God will take you and save you. Lord, if someone's watching by video, they've never accepted you as their own personal Savior. They don't know about they know about the giants, but all they see is no faith. Give them the faith they need to trust you as Savior. Bless us as we go into our Sunday school hour, as we teach, as the teachers teach lessons. As we listen, that we're able to learn more about you. Bless us, Father, and all God's people said.